Okay, so we had uh, completed the introduction last week, and that essentially uh, uh, gave us a clear and concise and crisp definition of Bhakti, the famous Anabhilashita Shunyam verse that helped us analyze the three primary and the two secondary characteristics of Bhakti. So today we will continue with chapter 1. So let me share. So the agenda today is that we will complete the first chapter, and after that we'll have question answers. So the title of the first chapter is Characteristics of Pure Devotional Service. So this is where it is in the flow. So quick recap. We had ended up with the definition of pure devotional service, and we had said that how this is the thesis statement or the Paribhasha Sutra. So in the first chapter, it's essentially divided into two parts. The first is kind of a continuation of the introduction, which is further Shastri affirmation of the pure devotional service. Essentially, further quotes from the scriptures about Bhakti. And then the bulk of the chapter talks about the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. So, having defined Bhakti, so far, Rupa Goswami has presented Bhakti as a philosophical concept, right? It's like theory. But for a practicing devotee, the theory needs to be brought down to practice. So Rupa Goswami, understanding this need, he then talks about how can we detect the presence of bhakti in ourselves and others. How can we understand about the growth of bhakti? And this is by symptoms. Right? Because at the end of the day, whatever has been explained theoretically needs to be perceived empirically, needs to be perceived on a sensory basis. So Rupa Goswami talks about the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. So first is the Shastric affirmation, and here I've kind of not gone into the same level of details because it's there in the chapter. You can leave it, you can read it over there. I wanted to leave you with just one of the main verses, which is spoken by Kapila Dev, and these are 3 verses that appears in the 3rd canto, chapter 29, in the instructions to Devahuti, right? And Lord Kapila Dev, who is an incarnation of Krishna, talks about how the pure devotee is so attracted to devotional service that even the 5 kinds of liberation do not attract. Right. So essentially, the point that Rupa Goswami makes by quoting these verses is a superlative position of bhakti, that it transcends bhakti, which is desire for material gains, and mukti, which is liberation. So bhakti appears in or progresses in 3 stages. The first stage is sadhana bhakti, which is bhakti by practice. This is at the stage where the person does not have a spontaneous attraction to Krishna. So this is divided into two stages. One is regulated and the other is spontaneous. So regulated is Vaidhi and spontaneous is Raghunag. Now, spontaneous here is that there is a spontaneous attraction to the practice of bhakti. Right? So it is still within the practice of the stage of sadhana. So it's kind of like somebody goes to school and studies there because he's expected to study. Right? So the teachers give him course material, he studies, he gives exams. So submits himself to the regulation of education. And then at some point, he progresses to the point where he actually enjoys doing what he's doing. Now, it's not necessarily that at the previous stage, he had an aversion to it, but there was no strong attraction. It's not that he was really attracted to going to school and studying hard over there. He did it because the student knew that it was expected of him. But then at some point, maybe he liked a subject, he developed genuine interest in it. So he still goes to school, he still studies, he still attends the lectures, but now he's enjoying it. So that is Raguna Bhakti. So these are those two stages of Sadhana Bhakti where the impetus is mostly external. In Sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti, it is almost entirely external. In the Sadhana Raghunag Bhakti, there is the accompaniment of attraction to the rules and regulations. Then Bhava Bhakti is where now there is a spontaneous attraction to Krishna. So, and the relationship between the devotee and Krishna is no longer dependent on the execution of rules and regulations. And then Prema Bhakti is essentially the advanced stage of Bhava Bhakti. Bhava Bhakti is called the dawn of perfection, and Prema Bhakti is complete perfection. Right? So the bulk of the first wave talks about sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti, right? And then few chapters on Raghunag, 2 chapters on Raghunag, and I believe 1 chapter each on Bhava and Prem, because essentially it is meant for practicing devotees, right? So most of the 19 chapters talk about sadhana Vaidhi Bhakti. For the purpose of this discussion, if you can keep this division of bhakti clear in your mind. It is divided into 3: sadhana, bhava, and prem. Sadhana is submission to rules, practicing rules and regulations. Bhava is the beginning of an emotional attachment, and prema is the perfection of it. Now, all 3 stages are bhakti, because they satisfy the Anyavilashita verse, but different levels of advancement. So this is the essence of this chapter, that what are the symptoms by which bhakti is recognized, and what are the symptoms that help us see the advancement of bhakti along these stages of sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. So now let's talk about the 6 qualities of bhakti in general. The first is called Kleshangani, and we'll talk in further details about each 6 of them. Right now I'm mentioning them. The first is Kleshangani, which is relief from material distress. Second is Subhada, which is attainment of auspiciousness. So the first is removal of negative, and the second is the achievement of positive. So the absence of sorrow does not necessarily mean the presence of happiness. Right? So in the earlier stages of bhakti, there is the relief from material distress, and the second is attainment of auspiciousness. Third is moksha lagutakrit, which is deriding the notion of liberation. The person does not get attracted to mukti. Going back to the verse of Lord Kapila Dev that was quoted, there are the 5 kinds of liberation: Sayuja Bhakti, Samipya Bhakti, Salokya Bhakti, Mukti. All those kinds of muktis do not attract the person who follows the process of bhakti. 4th is Sudurlabha, that it is very rarely achieved. 5th is Sandaranand Visheshatma, that it automatically puts one in transcendental pleasure. And the 6th is Sri Krishna Akarshani, that it is the only means to attract Krishna. Right? So these are the 6 symptoms or qualities of bhakti: Kleshangini, Subhada, Moksha Lagutagrat, Sudurlabha, Sandaranand, Visheshatma, and Sri Krishna Akarshani. Now, remember the 3 stages of bhakti that we talked about: sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prema bhakti. So, the first 2 stages, Kleshangini and Shubhada, are achieved during sadhana bhakti. The second 2, Moksha Lagu Akrit and Sudurlabha, are attained during bhava bhakti. So these are in addition to. So in bhava bhakti, 4 symptoms are displayed: Kleshangini, Subhada, Moksha Lagutagrat, and Sudurlabha. And finally, the last 2, the Sandranand, Visheshatma, and Krishna Akarshani, are attained during Prema Bhakti. So Prema Bhakti, when bhakti is fully mature, has these 6 qualities. So in this way, Rupa Goswami is also establishing the milestones of a devotee making progress on the path of bhakti. So, for instance, when a person is at the stage of bhava, then he displays the symptom of moksha lagutagrat. Now, Sudurlabha, it may seem more like a characteristic than a symptom, but it's a symptom in terms of the fact that very few people achieve it. Right? So, when a person so sometimes we come across groups of people who say we are at the stage of bhava. Okay? And by the symptom of Sudurlabha, we can understand that only after the practice of sadhana, the perfection of sadhana, only after the person has transcended bhukti and mukti does he reach the stage of bhava. Because emotions are internal, anybody can fake them. So that is why Sudurlabha is the symptom that talks about the rarity of this. And finally, prema has this symptom of extreme happiness, transcendental pleasure, and attracting the attention of Krishna. So normally the devotees are trying to place their attention towards Krishna. Like the focus is more ascending. When we are doing sadhana bhakti, that is ascending, that we are trying to repose our attention to Krishna. But at the stage of prema, Krishna is forced to put his attention to us. Like, because Krishna is so much attracted to his devotees that he is naturally attracted to devotees at this level of advancement. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of these 6 stages. Now, Kleshangini means relief from all material distress. So let us see, how does bhakti give relief from material distress? So one may argue that bhakti is a spiritual endeavor and distress is material. And we always make this point that the two things are different, water and oil. So how can a spiritual pursuit give material relief? So let's analyze the cause of material distress first. The root cause of the commencement of the cycle of suffering is avidya. So what is this avidya? This is the ignorance of one's own position with respect to Krishna. Because of that avidya comes this cycle. So avidya results in bijam, the seed of sinful desires. What does this sinful desire mean? The desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. So the sinful here is used in a little bit broader context. It's not just activities that are opposed to the Vedas. Sinful here is essentially material desires, desires that are not geared towards pleasing Krishna. So that seed of enjoying separately from Krishna comes because of this avidya. So when a person does not know his own position with respect to Krishna, he is confused about the fact that the supreme enjoyer is not Krishna but me. And because of that, he has the desire to enjoy. That bijam appears. From that bijam comes papam. Right? The desire results into action. From that papam comes aprarabdha. So aprarabdha is unmanifest reactions. That results in kuta or sinful disposition. Right? So this cycle is self-perpetuating. And from sinful desire comes sinful action. Because of that, there are unmanifest reactions. So take, for instance, Prabhupada gives that example that a thief goes and steals money. Now, as soon as he steals money, the sinful action has been performed. He may be caught tomorrow, or he may be caught 100 years later on, or 100 lifetimes later on. Right? So till the time he is caught, the reaction to that activity is aprarabdha, that is unmanifested. When the person is caught and punished, then the unmanifest reaction becomes manifest. So prarabdha is what we are actually suffering. For instance, the material body that we have is prarabdha. It's the result of our sinful activities. The distress that we are having, the material propensity, all that is prarabdha. Right? Now, let us see the result of performance of bhakti. So, everyone in this material world, from Brahma to the small ant, are caught in this cycle of avidya, bijam, papam, aprarabdha, kuta. That cycle is going on, and the side effect of that is prarabdha or suffering. When one begins to perform bhakti, the first thing that happens is that the manifest reactions are taken away. Right? Now, what does that mean? So, does that mean that the person, because we say the body is the result of prarabdha, does that mean the person loses the body, or everything becomes, the person becomes materially opulent, healthy, etc.? No. What it means is that the manifest reactions cease to be a cause of suffering for the person. So two people may be hungry. One person may be completely bewildered by the hunger. The person may be lamenting, I'm so hungry, I'm in so much of pain, when will my next meal come? And it's been 2 days since I've eaten. The other person is also hungry for 2 days, but he's not affected by it. So one may say that the manifest reactions are the same. Both the people are hungry. One person is suffering and the other person is not suffering. So the result of bhakti is that the suffering that happens because of prarabdha stops. So even devotees, they fall sick, they have accidents, they grow old, they die. So all the prarabdha is going on, but the suffering stops. So when Abhimanyu was killed in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Arjun was lamenting, right? So that was prarabdha. He was lamenting that my son has died. But he continued in his service to Krishna, so which meant that he did not let it affect his service. So that means the effect of that prarabdha went away. It became like a toothless serpent. The second thing that happens is that bhakti takes away sinful desires. And finally, what bhakti does is it takes away avidya. Now, I put it in a sequence, but does not mean that it happens as step 1, 2, 3, but there is a certain maturity that is there in the reactions. That as practicing devotees, we see that ourselves. That the first symptom is that we get less bewildered by uh, unfavorable circumstances, right? So a devotee and a non-devotee may be in similar circumstances, but the devotees become less bewildered, which is the suffering of prarabdha has gone away. Then the desire to commit sinful activities then reduce. That is bijam. And finally, sambandha gyan. One gets an understanding of one's relationship with Krishna. So avidya goes away. Right? So this whole cycle of suffering that is being propelled, its powerhouse is avidya, and it's being propelled by these various reactions is taken away. Right? So Rupa Goswami says devotional service eradicates sinful reactions, prarabdha, nullifies sinful desires, bijam, and most importantly, uproots ignorance, avidya. Therefore, it is the only efficient and effective way to achieve permanent relief from all suffering. Right? Because there is no other process that can stop this self-perpetuating cycle. So one may perform praishchit in order to reduce one's prarabdha. But still, avidya and bijam will be there. So one gets only temporary relief. But the bhakti, it cuts the chain. And when it cuts the chain, then the ability to deliver from that chain is automatically curtailed. Second is subhada, that Krishna consciousness is all auspicious. So earlier one was kleshangini, that it gives relief from distress. But bhakti does not stop at that point. It continues, and now after having eradicated the negative, it now gives us the positive, right? So what does auspiciousness mean? If one might say, I've been practicing bhakti, I still don't have $1 million in my account. Or I'm practicing bhakti, I still don't have 1 million followers. So in order to clearly explain what is auspiciousness, Rupa Goswami gives a clear definition of it. So he says real auspiciousness is something that benefits everyone. It will attract everyone and it will produce good qualities. So Rupa Goswami's definition of bhakti, or the Sanskrit definition of auspiciousness or subhada, is a little bit different from the material conception. If I want $1 million, it is going to benefit only me, right? It's probably going to harm 1 million people whose money I will be taking. So that is not auspiciousness. If it attracts everyone, that means it is not causing, it is not inducing envy in anyone. So bhakti does not put one in a lose-win situation. It puts one in a win-win situation, and then it produces all good qualities. And finally, bhakti bestows superior happiness, and we will see what the superior happiness is. So only devotional service can create auspiciousness that meets these 4 criteria. Nothing else can meet this 4 criteria. So benefits everyone and attracts everyone, right? So Padma Purana says that a person who is engaged in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness is to be understood as doing the best service to the whole world and pleasing everyone. In addition to the human society, he is pleasing even the trees and animals because they're attracted by such a movement. So Prabhupada would quote the Bhagavatam's famous verse of watering the roots of a tree, right? So that way it is benefiting everyone. So a person who is practicing philanthropy, it may be putting water on one leaf or a flower or on a branch, but bhakti is like watering the roots of the tree. In fact, the symptom of the all attractiveness of bhakti is that even those whose consciousness is covered are attracted to bhakti. Prabhupada gives the example of Mahaprabhu traveling in the Charikhand forest, and even the tigers. So it is said that even those who are naturally inimical to one another, the predators and the preys, the tiger and the deer, they were together performing Harinam with Mahaprabhu because they were all attracted to the quality of bhakti. And Prabhupada, he contrasted so at that time when Prabhupada wrote the Nectar of Devotion, then the United Nations was being formed. Prior to that, the organization was called, I think it was called the League of Nations, and it was a failure. So then they created the UN, and the Prabhupada talks about that how even the UN cannot be successful because it is not for the benefit of everyone, and nor does it attract everyone. And then he talks about how the great acharyas actually recommend the spreading of Krishna consciousness. That is the true United Nations. That is one that will actually benefit everyone and attract everyone. Then produces good quality, right? So here Prabhupada or Rupa Goswami quotes Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers to Lord Narasimhadev, that all the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. On the other hand, a person devoid of devotional service and engaged in material activities has no good qualities. Even if he is adept at the practice of mystic yoga or the honest endeavor of maintaining his family and relatives, he must be driven by his own mental speculation and must engage in the service of the Lord's external energy. How can there be any good qualities in such a man? So such a logical point Prahlad Maharaj is making. That if one is engaged in the illusory energy of the Lord, then he will be driven by this kind of confusion. So how is it possible for him to, to, to do something that is beneficial? So Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada, they make this very, very bold statement that a person who is not in Krishna consciousness cannot have any good qualities. Right? So on the face of it, it seems almost blasphemous that there are so many people who have good qualities, people who are philanthropic, people who are serving others, people who are kind, people who are serving by their intelligence. But if you look at it purely from an analytical perspective, the fact is that whatever they are doing is being engaged by the Lord's illusory energy. Right? So if somebody is under the dominion of a evil king, then even if the person is performing the best of the activities, the king will make sure that those activities are used for evil purposes. The evil king may have a Brahman, and the Brahman may perform all kinds of pious yajna. But then the king will use the power of that yajna to do evil activities. So in the same way, one may think that they're doing all kinds of good activities, but while they're engaged by the Lord's illusory energy, they will lack the ultimate good of the humanity. So that is why we see that the statement is bold, but it is true. And when a person is in Krishna consciousness, they're connected to Krishna's internal energy. And the spiritual energy will always result in good qualities. Okay. Then the fourth is that it bestows superior happiness. Right? So in the 6 qualities of bhakti, 3 kinds of happinesses are mentioned. There is happiness that comes from I'm sorry. So this is a general definition of happiness, that happiness can come from sense gratification, which is called Vishayanand. Happiness can come from Brahman realization, which is called Brahmanand. So first is from material objects. The second is from the notion of soul, Atma. So one can reach Brahman or Brahmanand. And the third is happiness that comes from engagement with Krishna. So we have 3 kinds of happiness: Vishayanand, Brahmanand, and Paramanand. So Vishayanand is and I won't go through the quotes in the interest of time, but Vishayanand is people going to extreme measures to get pleasure from material engagement. Right? Prabhupada gives the example from Chaitanya Charitamrita of Pullava Sridhar, where materially he was living in misery, but he was experiencing the highest happiness. So Prabhupada gives that story to prove that the happiness from Krishna consciousness is far superior from the happiness from material enjoyment. So we see asuras who enjoy great material opulence, but they're always agitated. And we see devotees who are living who may be living, they may choose to live in material poverty, but they are actually experiencing greatest of the pleasure. Right? And Prabhupada quotes Hari Bhakti Subodaya over here. So that was Vishayanand. Brahmanand is liberation from merging in the Brahman. And Prabhupada says that the fact that those that attain Brahmanand after some time fall down to once again seek even higher pleasures goes to prove that Brahmanand is not satisfying. Now, it is a lot more satisfying than Vishayanand because material happiness is really chapala. It is flickering on a moment-to-moment basis. You eat one chapati, you're happy. By the time you're on the fifth chapati, you're unhappy. You have a tummy ache. So from one moment to another, Vishayanand is flickering. Brahmanand, it's said that the soul lives in the Brahman for a very, very long time, but then falls down, right? Which means that eventually even that is not satisfying. And this is Lord Shiva's statement in Tantra Shastra that this is to Parvati Devi, that my dear wife, a person who has surrendered himself to Govinda, developed pure Krishna consciousness, can very easily be awarded all the perfection desired by the impersonalists. And he can enjoy the happiness and that is achieved by pure devotees. So this shows that devotional service includes the happiness of liberation. So this is an important point, that it's not that bhakti goes on a different tangent. So when we say that the pleasure of bhakti is greater than the pleasure of material enjoyment, what it means is that the pleasure of material enjoyment is included in the pleasure of bhakti. Similarly, the pleasure of liberation is included in the pleasure of bhakti. Sometimes, and I think this term was coined. Not sure who coined it, but it was made popular by Mahatma Gandhi. This whole Daridra Narayan, that those who Daridra Narayan, that worshippers of Narayan are poor. And Prabhupada speaks very strongly against it. That how can the worshippers of Narayan be poor if Narayan is served by Lakshmi Devi? Right? How can Narayan be poor? How can you say that Narayan is Daridra when he's being served by Lakshmi Devi? Then Rupa Goswami talks, and this is for reference, he talks about the Ashta Siddhis. And this is Anima, which is making the body small, Mahima, making it large, Lagima is by making the body super light or invisible, Prapti is acquisition of sense enjoyments, then Parakamya is ability to see all enjoyments in heaven, earth, or in the subterranean planets. Ishita is to infuse one's own power into another. This is the whole, when we say that like we say that Surya expanded into Karna. Right? Then Karna was infused by the power of Surya. So this is the Ishita Siddhi that the demigods have. Then Vashita is non-attachment while engaged in enjoyment. And Kamavasita is the ability to make all your desires come true. And these are the siddhis. Now, the point that is made is that all these siddhis are coming from Krishna. And the yogis attain it partially, right? And temporarily, right? So they attain it because even they have a connection to Krishna, but not in bhakti. Right? They attain it through samadhi, they attain it through astanga yoga, but essentially because they're catching a reflection of this siddhis in bhakti. And Prabhupada also makes this point that these siddhis are useless. right? So he says that you can attain them anyway through the marvels of engineering. He says, there is a siddhi by which you can make your body light and fly, but you can get a plane, and with that you can fly. With prapti you can acquire material pleasures, but you can be rich and acquire material pleasures. So there he says, what's the point in getting all these siddhis, because they're available anyway, right? So there is no difference between mystic perfection and materialistic perfection. And Prabhupada gives the example of a German scholar who came to India in search of these siddhis. And then after studying the siddhis, he said that, but they are already attainable by material beings. So what's the point in achieving something that one has already attained? And then he took shelter of Vaishnav Guru, and then understood that much superior to that is bhakti. So the conclusion is that the happiness of devotional service includes all others, right? And again, the point I want to emphasize is that one is not devoid of the happiness of bhukti or mukti. One may not care for it, but a person who is practicing bhakti also experiences the happiness of bhukti and mukti. But the person is so attracted to bhakti that he does not care for it. And so conclusion is that only devotional service is all auspicious because all attractive, all beneficial, develops saintly character and bestows superior happiness. Right. So we see that logically Rupa Goswami has established the position of bhakti as being only subhada. Only bhakti can be subhada or all auspicious. Now, these two characteristics of kleshangni and subhada, while they appear when we start practicing bhakti, they actually manifest at the stage of nishtha. Right. So if you look at the 8 stages of bhakti, then it starts it starts with shraddha, then sadhu sang, bhajana kriya, and then anartha nivriti, and then nishtha, ruchi, shakti, and then bhava and prem. So nishtha is a very advanced stage of bhakti. It happens after an artha nivriti. Anartha nivriti is one becomes devoid of all anarthas. One gets devoid of all contaminations. Then kleshangini and subhada are fully manifest. They're manifest right from the beginning. So even for devotees like us, I think somebody needs to mute themselves. Not sure who, but if you can please check your mic. If it is open, please mute. It's a little distracting. Thank you. So while kleshangini and subhada begin to appear right from the very first day of bhakti, but they're fully manifest at the stage of nishtha. Okay, so the third is moksha lagutagra, that derives the happiness of liberation. Right? So at the stage of nishtha, subhada and kleshangini are fully manifest. At the stage of bhava, the happiness of bhakti is so strong that one considers the bliss of liberation as insignificant. Right. So Rupa Goswami says that the four goals, the Chatur Purusharth, of which culminates in moksha, dharmartha, kama dharmartha, and moksha. So all four of them, and the highest of it is being moksha, they are insignificant. The fourth is sudurlabha, that it is very rarely achieved. And two reasons why it is rarely achieved. One is that we cannot achieve it on our own. Right? So one cannot say that I have been performing bhakti for the last 20 years, 50 years. So now I need to move to the stage of Uttam Bhakti. Right? So it's like you're working in an organization, you're working hard. Till some level, you get the promotion simply because of your hard work. Right? Earlier on, the promotions are more simply based on if you're performing okay, your performance reviews are good, you'll get promotions. But not everybody will become the CEO. Right? The owner of the company has to be convinced that you are CEO material. Right? So Bhava Bhakti, it cannot be achieved by one's own endeavor. It is bestowed, right? So that makes it rare. And second is, if we cannot get it, who gives it to us? Krishna. And Krishna is so reluctant is not, it's the close word, but not the best word. Krishna is careful in giving to it, right? Because essentially, it's like a person may have many friends, but to one friend, the person will say, "Here are the keys to my house. Feel free to come in. You are now a member of my family." So when a person has attained Uttam Bhakti, then Krishna is giving him the keys to the spiritual kingdom, right? Where his nearest and dearest ones are living. So Krishna is reluctant to give it, which is why it is Sudurlabha, right? So these are quotes that are substantiating these two difficulties, that it cannot be achieved by one's own effort. It is only bestowed by Krishna, because only pure devotional service gives the jiva the power to control Krishna. Right? So it's said that Krishna is controlled by his devotees. Now, Krishna is happily controlled by his devotees, right? So we have to understand that reluctance is not the right word. It's just that Krishna is careful, right? So he makes sure that the person is qualified. But it is Krishna's discretion. It is not achieved by our own effort. Right? So Bhava Bhakti is again another quote. Right? So we may progress through all the stages of sadhana bhakti, right? But ultimately, Bhava Bhakti is bestowed. So this characteristic of pure devotional service exists and manifests at the stage of Bhava. One can understand that a person cannot obtain Bhava Bhakti by any path of self-realization. Even sadhana bhakti does not directly bestow Bhava Bhakti. It is only achieved by the grace of the Lord. Right? So that is why it is difficult to achieve. Right? The fifth symptom is Sandranand, the incalculably condensed bliss. So after bhava comes prema, and in prema, the fifth characteristic of bhakti is there, So Sandra Anand, Anand is happiness, and Sandra Anand Visheshatma means that it is incalculably condensed uh, bliss. Right. So Sandra means that highly concentrated and condensed to the point of impenetrability. Anand is bliss. Vishesh means special or distinctive. And Atma means self. So literally it means that the distinctive nature of Prema Bhakti is impenetrably condensed, concentrated bliss. Right? And we'll speak about this when we discuss Bhakti. But to understand the 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 symptoms over here. So uh, in the 5 symptoms that we have done so far, we have seen 3 kinds of happiness. We have seen Subhada, that comes at the stage of sadhana bhakti, specifically at the stage of nishtha. So Subhada is superior to the happiness that one gets from Visheshanand and Mokshanand, from sense gratification and liberation. Then Moksha Lagurakt is appearing at the stage of Bhava Bhakti, and it is so superior to the happiness of liberation that it makes it appear insignificant. And then finally, Sandranand Visheshatma is at the stage of Prema Bhakti, that it is so superior that one cannot even perceive the existence of the other kinds of bhakti. So when you're sitting on a plane and the plane takes off from the runway, initially when you look down from the window, you can see the runway, you can see the people over there. When the place is a little bit higher, you can see the city, you can see the blocks, you can see the trees. And when the plane is right at its cruising speed, you can't even see it. It just like doesn't even exist. So as one becomes more and more absorbed in bhakti, then the happiness that comes from material, whether it is from sense gratification or liberation, it becomes more and more insignificant. And finally, see Krishna Akarshani, that it attracts the Lord. So we said this is one reason why Krishna is reluctant to give it. So Krishna is Atmaram, right? But he is still attracted to the devotees. And essentially, the point is that there's no contradiction, because the devotees are also under his own Haladani Shakti. Right? So essentially, it's saying that he's Atmaram, he's self-sufficient, and is attracted to his own energy. Right? So there's no contradiction in the terms. So these are again Shastric references. The example Prabhupada gives is that of the Pandavas, that even though Krishna is the Lord, then he was still controlled by the Pandavas. Right? And Narad Muni in the 7th canto, he talks to Yudhishthira about this quality. So there are 2 kinds of control. So when Rupa Goswami is talking about Sudurlabha, he briefly mentioned that the Lord is controlled by the love of his devotees, the Pandavas. Then in the 6th characteristic of Krishna Akarshani, he also notes that the Lord is controlled by the love. So both of them are attracting the Lord, but to different degrees, right? So at the bhava stage, the Lord bestows bhakti on the devotee, so the devotee begins to attract the Lord. And at the prema stage, the devotee is actually participating in the pastime of the Lord. Right. So, so the example is that again. Okay. So so let's assume you're again working in an organization and you're doing well. So the CEO begins to notice you. This person is doing well, happy with this person, right? That's at the earlier stage. But then because of that noticing, the CEO actually begins to develop affection for you. He says, okay, now you can come to my house. I have a party. Come to my house and be a part of the party. I'm going on a vacation. You participate in vacation. So the attention now grows to the point where the person is now inviting you to be a part of his family. So they both are symptoms of the same thing. They both are symptoms of the attraction of the Lord on the devotee, but increasing levels of it. So quick recap. The first two stages, Kleshangini and Subhada, they appear at the stage of sadhana. Moksha Labhudagrada and Sudurlabha at the stage of bhava. And Sandranand Visheshatma and Krishna Krishani, they appear at the stage of prema. So these are the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service. So really speaking, we have only 1 minute, but I would like to at this point open up for questions. And for those who want to drop off, please do, but I will take maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes if there are questions because while this topic is fresh in the mind, I want to see if there's any discussions. Yes, go ahead, Akhila Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my obeisances. Prabhu, regarding the topic on the king is evil, but even though you're doing good, uh, it is not used properly. Is that something can be connected with how Dronacharya and Bhishma Pitamaha was linked with Duryodhana? Is that something that is what it is also? Hello?
I'm sorry, Mataji. I was just thinking, I don't really understand your question. So let me see. Let me reflect back. So you're saying that the activities of Dronacharya and Bhishma towards Duryodhan, they come in the category of how material piety may not be beneficial.
Yeah, is that what it is, Prabhu? Is that this?
Yes and no. So why did Bhishma support? Uh, um, why did Bhishma and Dronacharya support Duryodhan? Uh, because of personal reasons, right? It meant it. Uh, Bhishma had taken a vow to serve the throne of Hastinapur. Dronacharya, he was attracted to material opulence, which the Kauravas were giving, and because of that, they had pledged allegiance to Duryodhan. Um, so different reasons. But the point that you bring up is a very good point that uh, the pursuit of material happiness is always contaminated by something. Like in this case, it is contaminated by Bhishma's, the Acharya said, by Bhishma's pride. That is pride in the fact that he followed his vows. And it was contaminated by Dronacharya's greed, that he was greedy for Ashwatthama. He wanted him to have an opulent life. So the nature of material happiness is such that it is always contaminated. But the nature of spiritual endeavors is that it is not impacted by these modes. right? So, I think you bring forth this important distinction by this example. On the other hand, the Pandavas, they were, even though it seems that they were pursuing their kingdom, they were pursuing glories, but ultimately that was second to their desire to please Krishna. And so that's why the Pandavas come in the category of executing bhakti. Even though externally it may seem that both Duryodhana and Yudhishthira were fighting for the for the throne, but the motivation was different.
Okay, thank you so much, Prabhu. And one more question. Um, is the human form the only pathway to the spiritual world?
No, in the Bhagavatam it is clearly stated, right, that the spirit soul in any form, at any point of time, in any situation, has the right to execute bhakti. And that's the universality of bhakti. Because again, by principle, if bhakti is the characteristic of the soul, then wherever the soul is present, bhakti, the ability of bhakti to manifest should be there. So whether it is present in an animal form, whether it is present in human form, the ability to execute bhakti should be there. In the human form, there is a little bit of advantage, and this is mentioned in the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam, that because so this is where a disadvantage becomes an advantage, because the human form of life is short, and because there is suffering in the human form of life, it allows one to seek for solutions which ultimately can lead them to the path of bhakti. Right? So they're enablers, but bhakti is the right of the soul. So wherever there is soul, there is the right to execute bhakti.
Oh, thank you so much, Prabhu. So I think that's how, like, I've heard, like, human form is like a runway to like the spiritual world. So I think like that is what I should understand. My understanding was different. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for clarifying that, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Wonderful questions. Yes, Naval Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Tanur Pranam. Prabhu, you mentioned that anarthas continue up to Nishtha. At Nishtha, they are eradicated at the stage of Nishtha. But I was also hearing Guru Maharaj's lecture of this Madhurya Kadambini, where he says that anarthas continue right up to the stage of just before Bhava, right up to Asakti. So, isn't it?
So yes, so Vishwanath Chakravarti makes this point of the reduction of anarthas with the progress of bhakti, and at the stage of anartha nivriti, the anarthas are for all practical purposes eliminated, but the traces are still there, and the traces continue. He gives the example of that when a city is destroyed, then it's reasonable to say that the city ceases to exist. But one can point to that place and say this is where the ruins are there, right? So he says that is the anartha nivriti stage. But when one reaches the stage when the city disappears, there is just forest and trees, and somebody looks down and says, "Where is the city? I don't know where the city is." Right? That happens at the stage of Bhava. And the example that is given is Maharaj must have given the example of Bharat Maharaj, that he was at the stage of Bhava, but yet he had traces of anartha. And so very, very fine traces of anartha. But from our perspective, from the perspective of Kleshangini and Subhada, anartha nivriti is sufficient for these two symptoms to manifest. Okay. Okay, wonderful question. Thank you. So I see that there are There are no more questions, so we'll pause over here. वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितनां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो